The air in the Redwood County Superior Court was stale and thick with unspoken tension. Judge Samuel Donovan presided from his high bench, his fingers drumming a restless, silent rhythm on the polished wood. Below, Sergeant Riley lounged in his chair as if he were in his own living room, radiating the smug confidence of a man who believed the rules were for other people. His expensive suit was a uniform, his contemptuous sneer a badge of honor. He was untouchable. Then the side door opened and Caleb Hayes walked in. He was the picture of unremarkable, a man designed to be overlooked. But his eyes were a different story. They missed nothing, sweeping the room with a calm, unnerving focus that settled on Riley for a fraction of a second too long. When his name was called, Caleb moved to the witness stand with a deliberate, steady pace that felt dangerously out of place in the nervous room. Riley leaned toward his lawyer, his whisper a venomous stage whisper meant to be heard. Seriously? This is the star witness they dug up? A muffled laugh came from the defense table. Riley leaned back, looking performatively bored, but he didn't see the flicker of cold steel in Caleb's eyes. Caleb heard him. He simply folded his hands in his lap, a portrait of patience, and waited for the game to begin. "Mr. Hayes," the defense attorney began, practically sneering the name, "could you please tell the court what you believe you saw on the night of October 7th near the Sterling Industrial Park?" Caleb leaned into the microphone, his voice even and clear. "I don't need to believe. I saw. I was conducting a surveillance operation when I witnessed Sergeant Riley perform an illegal search on 2 individuals. I then saw him confiscate a package before releasing them without making an arrest." The lawyer scoffed loudly. "That's a fantastic story. Are you actually claiming under oath that you witnessed this supposed event?" "I am," Caleb replied, his voice flat and absolute. "And I recorded the entire exchange on high-definition video." Riley's smirk finally cracked. It was a barely visible twitch of his upper lip, but in the dead silence of the courtroom, it was a seismic event. Judge Donovan leaned forward, his own interest piqued. "You mentioned a surveillance operation, Mr. Hayes. On whose authority were you acting?" The courtroom held a collective breath. Caleb reached inside his blazer, a slow, deliberate motion, and pulled out a simple leather ID wallet. He flipped it open. The gold and blue federal seal seemed to catch every light in the room. "Special Agent Caleb Hayes," he announced, his voice suddenly infused with an authority that cut through the silence like a razor. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." The atmosphere turned electric. Every drop of color drained from Jack Riley's face as if a plug had been pulled. The smug confidence evaporated, replaced by the pale, slack-jawed shock of a man who realized he hadn't just been caught, he had been hunted. Caleb never took his eyes off him, locking him in a cold, professional gaze. "For the last 10 months, my team has been conducting a deep-cover federal corruption probe into the Redwood County Sheriff's Office, an operation that was, until this exact moment, classified." He paused, letting the weight of the words crush the air out of the room. "And you, Sergeant Riley, were my primary target." Riley's downfall didn't begin in that courtroom. It began 10 months earlier, in the brutal, suffocating heat of an Ohio summer. Special Agent Caleb Hayes sat in a worn-out Toyota Camry, studying the file on the passenger seat. On paper, Jack Riley was a hero, a cop's cop. The file, however, revealed the monster beneath the uniform, a methodical predator who thrived on lost evidence and coerced confessions. "Riley is more than just dirty," his director, Assistant Director Eva Rostova, had briefed him. "He's running his own protection racket, and he's insulated himself completely. He's smart, arrogant, and he sees threats coming a mile away. We need someone on the inside. Someone he'll look right through." "You want me to become a ghost," Caleb had stated, not asked. "Exactly," Rostova confirmed, her eyes grim. "No badge, no weapon, no backup for miles. We need him to look at you and see exactly what he expects to see. Nothing." So Special Agent Caleb Hayes vanished. In his place was Cal, a quiet man with tired eyes who seemed to drift from one odd job to the next. For 10 months, he faded into the very scenery of the neighborhood Riley ruled with fear. Every night, he meticulously documented the web of corruption and intimidation that had poisoned the community. At the very center of that web was Sergeant Riley. Cal made himself forgettable, a shadow who shopped at the dollar store and never made eye contact. He understood the neighborhood's nervous system. He knew the kid across the alley, Jamal, was a runner, but he wasn't the target. He was just a thread. And every single thread, no matter how small, led back to Riley. The fear was palpable. When Riley's black Ford Explorer cruised down the street, people would scatter, ducking into shops or simply turning and walking the other way. Even Mrs. Patterson, the old woman who saw everything from behind the plastic on her furniture, spoke of the decay in hushed tones. "They come around here, promising to clean things up," she'd whispered to Cal one evening, her voice brittle with weary resentment. "But the only thing they ever clean out are people's wallets." Cal had just nodded, absorbing the town's silent scream for justice. He didn't see Riley up close until the fourth week. Cal was walking back from the grocery store when the black Ford Explorer screeched to a halt at the curb, cutting him off. Sergeant Jack Riley stepped out. He didn't wear a badge. The entitled menace in his posture was all the identification he needed. New face, Riley thought, his eyes narrowing. Doesn't belong here. "Hey, you!" he called out, his voice sharp with unearned authority. Cal stopped and turned slowly, his expression carefully neutral. Riley strode up to him, deliberately invading his personal space. "Haven't seen you around before." He looked Cal up and down, a contemptuous sneer twisting his lips. He was sizing him up, dismissing him. "You with family here?" "Just me," Cal said, his voice flat, betraying nothing. "Right." The sneer turned into a predatory grin. He stepped even closer, until the smell of stale coffee and cigarettes was suffocating. Cal's training screamed at him to create distance, but his face remained a blank mask. "Let me give you some friendly advice," Riley said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was pure threat. "You see anything out of place, you come to me. Understand? The other cops around here, they don't handle things right." He jabbed a thumb at the cheap bag of groceries in Cal's hand. "Gotta keep the neighborhood clean, right?" He walked away without another word. The moment Cal was inside his apartment, the door locked and bolted. He uploaded the footage from the pinhole camera on his jacket. Subject initiated contact without probable cause. Issued implicit threats. Attempted intimidation based on racial profiling. That was the first move in Riley's playbook. After that, he was a constant, lurking presence. He'd cruise through the neighborhood like a shark, his two loyalists, deputies Russo and Finch, in his wake. Cal watched them shake down kids on street corners, their hands moving with a practiced, humiliating indifference. They were a unit, a cancer that had infected the whole department. The pressure mounted. A patrol car would idle across from his apartment for an hour at a time, its presence a silent warning. One morning, his trash can, and only his, was overturned, its contents dumped across the sidewalk in a deliberate, insulting display. They were prodding him, testing for a reaction. He gave them nothing. Then Riley got sloppy. He gave Cal something bigger. A known dealer, Rico Vargas, had his entire rap sheet mysteriously wiped clean 2 months prior, yet he still operated with total freedom. Cal followed him one night to a derelict warehouse on the edge of town. From the deepest shadows, he recorded the whole exchange. Riley, laughing and smoking with Vargas, taking a thick envelope stuffed with cash. In return, he handed over a small locked case. It was a direct payoff, undeniable and clear as day. He submitted the encrypted footage at 2:15 a.m. The response was swift. The next morning, his water was shut off. Not the buildings, just his unit. The valve outside had been manually closed. Later that day, his terrified neighbor, Mr. Chen, pulled him aside in the hallway. "They've been asking about you," he whispered, his hands trembling violently. "Not the regular patrolmen, the mean ones. They wanted to know who you were, who you talked to." The message was crystal clear. The hunter was now the hunted. The invisible line Cal had been walking was gone. Riley was done testing him from a distance. He was coming for him directly. He cornered Cal the next afternoon, rolling up slowly in his Explorer. "You know," Riley said, his eyes as cold and hard as river stones, "you seem familiar." I don't forget faces. Before Cal could reply, Riley's gaze dropped to his jacket. You always wear that thing? He smiled, a predator's grin that didn't reach his eyes, then sped off, leaving a cloud of dust and menace in his wake. That night, Cal found a clean, deliberate crack running across his back window. It wasn't a break-in. It was a signature. I can get to you whenever I want. The next escalation came against his cousin, fellow agent Ben Carter, who was visiting to exchange intel. Two of Riley's plainclothes goons, Russo and Finch, grabbed him off the street. They roughed him up, leaving him with a split lip and a final chilling warning. Tell your cousin to stop being so damn curious, one of them had growled before dumping him in a park miles away. Cal's jaw tightened into a knot of cold fury. The threat was no longer just to him. They were closing in on his cover, on his life. He filed a coded report. Compromise imminent. Subject escalating to physical assault on associates. The reply from Director Rostova was blunt. You're close. Do not abort. We are moving pieces into place. A week later, Riley showed up at his door. Cal opened it before he could knock. Morning, Riley said, chewing on a toothpick like a movie villain. Just checking in on the neighbors. You seem a little tense lately. He craned his neck, trying to see inside the apartment. Cal stepped onto the porch, closing the door firmly behind him, blocking the view. If you don't have a warrant, Sergeant, we're done here. Riley's smile vanished, replaced by pure venom. Be careful who you talk to, he hissed, his voice a low threat. You might say something you can't take back. He turned and walked away, his swagger a little too forced. That night, Cal didn't sleep. He sat in his darkened living room, his service weapon disassembled on the coffee table. He methodically cleaned each piece, the scent of gun oil filling the small space. It wasn't about fear, it was a ritual. With each click and swipe, the meek, tired Cal faded away, and the focused, lethal federal agent reemerged. He was no longer the bait, he was the trap. The final move had to be flawless. Cal met Director Rostova at a deserted car wash to finalize the plan. He knows he's being watched, Cal stated. I have to bait him, make him think he's won. You want him to believe he owns you? Rostova asked. Exactly, Cal confirmed. His arrogance is his greatest weakness. He won't be able to resist. The bait came 2 nights later via a text from a burner phone. Ironwood Scrapyard. 10 p.m. Come alone. Cal's reply was short, designed to sound just reluctant enough. Fine. Don't waste my time. He went wearing 3 wires and a pinhole camera on his jacket. The Ironwood Scrapyard was a maze of rusted metal and deep shadows. Riley was waiting, leaning against a stack of crushed cars with a heavy duffel bag in his hand. Glad you could make it, he sneered. I was beginning to think you were a coward. I'm not a coward, Cal said, his voice steady as every detail was streamed to Rostova's hidden team. No, Riley laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You're just in over your head. I run this town. Anyone who operates here either works for me or they disappear. He tossed the duffel bag at Cal's feet. That's your sign-on bonus. You're my new guy on the east side. You answer to me now. Cal knelt and unzipped the bag, revealing bricks of narcotics and stacks of cash. And if I say no, Riley's face hardened. Then you won't be saying anything ever again. He pulled a Glock from the small of his back. This is how the game is played. No, Sergeant, Cal said, his voice now cold and devoid of fear. This is how the game ends. On cue, the world erupted. High-intensity floodlights blasted the scrapyard, turning night into day. The roar of engines filled the air as 3 black FBI tactical vans boxed Riley in. Red and blue lights strobed across his stunned face. He froze, unable to process the sudden, overwhelming chaos. Before he could raise his weapon, a calm, authoritative voice cut through the noise. Jack Riley, you are under arrest. Director Eva Rostova stepped out of the lead vehicle, flanked by armed agents. Riley stared at her, then at Cal, who stood with an expression of cold, professional finality. The smirk was gone, replaced by the dawning horror of absolute defeat. The final scene was in a sterile, white interrogation room. Riley, stripped of his badge, weapon, and arrogance, sat hunched in a cheap suit. Across the table, a federal prosecutor stared him down, while Director Rostova stood silently in the corner. The prosecutor slid a thick binder across the table. "This is everything, Riley," he said flatly. 10 months of surveillance. Audio, video, and sworn testimony from your own deputies. We have it all." He leaned forward. "You can sign this full confession, name every dirty cop, and resign in disgrace. You'll still do time, but you won't die in prison." Riley's face was pale, his hands trembling. He stared at the papers, then at Rostova, then back at the confession. With a broken sigh, he picked up the pen. As he signed his life away, Caleb Hayes watched from behind the one-way glass of the observation room. He didn't smile. He just watched until the last signature was complete. The debt was paid. The board was cleared. He turned and walked away without a backward glance.